Welcome back for another installment of Rex, the Shiba Inu. Rex is turning out to be an absolute fireball in obedience when he's in drive. When he is not in drive, he's a fireball in other ways. But that is just par for the course with the Shiba puppy. Rex is very strong-willed, but when he is in drive, he is so focused, it is absolutely a pleasure to work him. There are some tricks to getting him in drive and keeping him in drive, and in these sessions that I'll show you in this video, we'll go over some of these tricks or concepts about getting a Shiba puppy into drive. Movement, 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 and capping. Capping is a concept where we take the puppy or the dog at any age, we take the dog's drive, and we get them amped, and we ask them to give us a stationary behavior and bottle up that drive, and then we use movement in the reward event to reinforce that behavior. If I wanted a active Shiba puppy that just ran all the time, I wouldn't have to do a thing. That's its natural state. It wants to just tear around the house at blurring speeds and tear around the yard at an insane speed. There's no problem to getting this dog to move. And what you'll see during these sessions, this session here is early in week 2 of Rex's 4-week board and train. What you'll find in this session is you'll notice points where he is starting to drift out of drive, and really what's happening is I'm holding him in a capped state too long. And when I recognize this, I have choices to make. I can allow his motion, his movement to be self-reinforcing. I can wait him out. I could chase him down, which would generally be a bad choice. Or I can work on my recall skills and provide intense rewards for him coming back into engagement with me. And here I'm showing a movement type reward. I've sped this footage up about 300%. So take that into account as you watch this, because his duration in these behaviors is 3 times longer than you observe here because of the sped up footage. You'll notice here Rex is holding these behaviors with a fairly stable pattern. When I ask for the touch, it is an implied stay, which means until I release him from that behavior, my expectation is that he holds it. He's also starting to show us return to behavior on his no marker, his non-reinforcement marker. This is very good. I'm not using any force with Rex. You'll notice here he's on a harness, and in this early session, I keep him on the harness and leash just to keep him engaged. If he started to wander off, I'd be able to steer him back. What you'll see in this later session, here we are in late week 2 of his 4-week board and train. As soon as I have him in drive, the leash is no longer useful to me other than if he were to fall out of drive. And he does fall out of drive in this session, but this session itself was over 16 minutes long, and his amount of time out of drive in 16 minutes was about a minute. Phenomenally good for a 12, 13, 14-week-old puppy. Can't stress this enough, that if we can keep a dog like this in drive for that long, and I mean deeply in drive, then we're doing really good. The tendency with a dog like this is actually to overwork them. And so I caution anyone who sees a puppy of this age with this level of drive, don't stretch your sessions until they're falling apart. Don't stretch your sessions until they're exhausted. Puppies, like little babies, get tired, get overstimulated. They get full if you're using food rewards. And don't push these until you've wrecked the session for your puppy. 10, 15 minutes is really as long as you should be going. And I have to remember this as I work these dogs, not to overwork them. There's a thing in dog training called overwork syndrome. And what it looks like with a Shiba Inu, or most other dogs, is a dog who runs around us in circles a lot of times. The dog seems very driven, but it's not focused. And so when we start to get this behavior from a Shiba, which is natural for a Shiba to want to run around, I think I mentioned this already, we have some choices. We can allow that running around to self-reinforce, generally a bad idea. We could chase them down, generally a bad idea. We could use tools like a leash and harness or a leash and collar to rein them in. Or we can end our session, and that's usually the better option. If we can't keep them in drive, end the session, or bring out some play. If my choice is between allowing their running around to self-reinforce checking out or to engage them in play, I should probably choose engage them in play. Notice I've detached the leash here. There's absolutely no force or coercion being used on Rex here. It's all food reward. And we're working on position changes. We're working on adding verbal cue to the luring work that we've done. Rex lures very well, and actually he's very sensitive to lure, so we have to work on getting him off of lure fairly quickly. He's also very attracted to hands and biting them, which is why I'm wearing gloves, and I'm continuing to non-reinforce his biting. He's made immense progress in this area, and he's taking food very well and carefully without biting at my hands, and here I've lost him out of drive, and really this happens because of frustration for him. I've told him no a couple of times. And those no's aren't meant to be derogatory to him. They're supposed to be information that his behavior wasn't what I was asking for and wouldn't be rewarded. He gets too many of those, and he starts to think he can self-reward and go do what he's interested in. In that case, what he was interested in was going and pottying off the field. So I allowed that to happen, and when he was done, I called him back, and you saw a beautiful recall. But that other motivator that was involved there, him needing to potty, was overriding anything I could have done. Chasing him would have been a bad idea in that case. So if you hear clicking noises other than the rain here, if you hear clicking noises during this video, be advised there is no clicker in use. This is all verbal signal, but there is a significant amount of rain noise, as well as in 2 of the training sessions there was a fire burning just off camera. Oh, here he goes again. And a beautiful recall. We lose engagement, and because we've done some recall work with him, we're getting him right back. I'm just being careful about not over-recalling him. If he's engaged on a stimuli out of my bubble, out of my ability to influence him, I'm not trying to recall him. I'm waiting until that stimuli fades a little bit in intensity. Sorry if I'm talking really fast. Speeding up the video tends to make me think and talk faster here. Here I'm working on building some left leg focus with Rex for work in healing, and he's doing a beautiful job. Notice he's traveling forward and backward with me. His sits are becoming automatic upon stopping with my feet together. Beautiful automatic sit there. I'm not commanding sit. I'm cueing heel verbally as we start this work, but not providing verbal cues during the work. And here I've lost him again for a moment. And I've picked up the leash because I'm starting to think about ending this session. 2 or 3 times in a session, losing focus and running around means we need to think about ending the session. What I'm going to look for here is to bring him back and get a couple of reps to end on a positive note. I never want to end on a note of the dog self-reinforcing, running away. So I've picked him up, reattached the leash just so I have a little bit more control. And we're going to get a couple of reps here, a couple of sits, a little reward, and then move on, get inside, warm up. The fact that he can work through all of the distraction and sort of negative stressful stimuli of all that rain and what was going on there is phenomenal. You notice his drive here is even better when it's a non-rainy day. And again, as soon as I have him firmly in drive, I'm going to take his leash off. It's just not helping us at this point. I have a traffic cone out here next to my touchpad, and this is really just a reminder to myself. It's like a string tied around my finger to use motion and movement to reinforce Rex's behavior. So during his reward events, I'm running him around that cone, and eventually I'll put this behavior itself on cue. He'll find this movement very rewarding. And so during this session, I start to use the word around. Hard to make out because I've sped the footage up, but I'll use the word around to cue him to run around the cone and back to the touchpad. This behavior is really just something that he finds rewarding, that we can put on cue and give him a chance to reward himself with movement, especially when we're doing all of this capping behavior where he has to hold himself still. This requires an immense amount of concentration from a puppy like this. The fact that he's giving us these behaviors on verbal cue alone in this session, sits and downs on many cases, and touches on the touchpad with no luring, is pretty phenomenal for a puppy this age. I am adding a little bit of luring back over when I notice he has a little bit of trouble. So you will see it from time to time, but you'll also see our movement towards less luring. Here, I'm working on his engagement on my face, facial focus, by hiding his treat behind my head. I've noticed that he tends to be very hand-focused because of movement. He has extremely keen eyes that pick up a leaf flittering on a tree or a moth or a bird from great distances. So I'm working on stand from a down position here, and he's downing on verbal cue beautifully. And I'm just luring into the stand by pressing into his nose. And likewise the sit, luring his nose up, while the stand from a sit is pushing back into his nose. Here I have an empty hand just to show him that there's no food in it, and he still needs to do the touch. Rex is a powerful little dog. He's very muscular, stout legs. I've also worked on a behavior that he does quite well in the house, where he jumps onto my hand with his front legs, kind of a double high five. And that was actually intended to be counter conditioning. He doesn't like having his feet touched, and he will bite and shriek. That's not Rex barking, by the way. That's another dog off camera. With the speed up, that sounds like it could be a Shiba, but that's actually a German Shepherd with a much deeper bark, just sped up. I noticed he was checking out here, so my choice was to get out his ball on a rope and play some ball to get him re-engaged with me. But notice he'll self-gratify with this as well. He'll grab it and thrash it like he's killing prey. There I've called him away from the ball and given him a reward for touching the touchpad with me. And I'm going to do it again here. The fact that he will do this means he finds the food rewards and the engagement very fulfilling in itself. But if we can pair those two things together, even better. He's acting like he needs to potty here. Pretty normal for Rex. When he needs to potty, he's got to go, and there's not a lot we can do about it. So I picked up my leash and I waited for him to finish, and he was about done with that session anyway. Hope you've enjoyed this installment of Rex the Shiba Inu. If you would like to have your dog trained in our boarding program, please reach out to us through our website, www.audaxcanine.com, or you can email me at jason@audaxcanine.com. Thank you very much. Semper Audax.